DBC in my Welsh top, just after having a bath and taking an opportunity to post something up on my channel regarding wrestling creative. During the Attitude Era, I think something fairly substantial happened because you had Stone Cold Steve Austin involved with such a dynamic and interesting feud that ran and ran and ran with the McMahon family, in particular Vince McMahon. That's kind of the time where I felt that managers, valets, if you will, but specifically the managers, kind of sort of like disappeared from the wrestling industry. And probably for the time, if you look at it, it was a necessary process that Vince needed to come out all guns blazing to fight the WCW with Stone Cold, and as a result, that's kind of why the manager angle kind of disappeared. Also, a lot of the great managers had moved on and were doing other things, or they had sort of like moved across to WCW. You know, you had Jimmy Hart over at WCW, you had Bobby the Brain Heenan move across to WCW, and that's probably why Vince McMahon moved in the angle that he did. To kind of combat the way in which the WCW was going about things. It comes to today, and I don't know about anybody else, but I seriously miss the days of managers. You kind of know now that all these guys work for Vince McMahon. You kind of know now in TNA all these guys work for Dixie Carter, even though they'll try and say there's a feud at the top, we know who owns the company. And I really miss the days where you had some really, really good managers like Classy Freddie Blassie, where you had Jimmy Mathis, Ad Hart, and Bobby Brain Heenan, who I've mentioned before. Mr. Fuji was another good example of a good manager. A valet stroke great manager was Miss Elizabeth. And there's one or the other of the companies that really should go back and revisit this idea. It gives much more of a feeling of stables and independence to certain wrestlers, and I don't think that someone like Vicky Guerrero is enough. You need to have a few others sort of like sparring off there. The obvious company to do this would be TNA, because as I've mentioned before, you could have Hulk Hogan, Mick Foley, Sting, Ric Flair, all leading different stables, and that kind of leads me on to the sort of like the new tip, the new idea is rather than just going back to sort of like managers in suits and sort of them being the mouthpiece for wrestlers that need it. I mean, a good example of that would be John Morrison or Jack Swagger. But you could actually create this idea of fighting managers, you know, men that have been around the ring and do know what's going on in the business and do know what's going on during matches. And I think that would be a very sensible way of sort of like creating something that's old back into sort of like a new idea. And really, I think TNA are the company that have got this facility ready and waiting, sitting, sort of like staring them in the face. I think Vince McMahon would have a lot of a harder job to sort of like create the whole idea of managers sort of like coming back into WWE now, but TNA would be able to sell it to the fans. So it's something that sort of like really sort of like ticked over, and I kind of never really noticed that he disappeared until other people on the internet kind of said that he disappeared, and I was like, oh yeah, hang on. I think that sort of, you know, when you look at like the Heenan family and sort of like the way in which he created sort of like this mighty empire and had, I mean, at WrestleMania 3, he was involved in like 6, 7 of the matches. I mean, there are even a couple of his wrestlers out there that he didn't get involved in the match, presumably because he didn't have time because he was getting changed. And it's something that actually, looking back on now, I really miss from the wrestling industry. And I think that it's something that both TNA and WWE should look at. Like I said before, I think it's TNA that have got a stronger push when it comes to this sort of like angle of creating that sort of like thing, because they've got the people that they want to keep and the paychecks that they want to give without damaging them anymore. Yeah, I think the trouble with WWE is WWE has so intrinsically got some major work to do in so many of the divisions in their sports entertainment that actually it could be a good while before we sort of like see that influence of managers sort of like coming back into the game. It really added an extra element, it really added an extra flair, it really added extra style, and it gave a different tone to the different wrestlers, even when you had one wrestler being managed by someone and then they moved across and they were wrestled by someone else. But intrinsically, as much as they are, to my mind, one of the greatest tag teams of all time, the Hart Foundation. Primarily not because I'm actually that much of a Bret the Hitman Hart fan, I understand technique and stuff like that, but because I just love Jim the Anvil Neidhart. I thought he was hilarious. I love his little folk anthrax thing going on. But with Jimmy Hart is the time that I remember them, rather than the turn where Jimmy sort of like left them and they kind of ran as the Hart Foundation themselves. I mean, they ran a really good sort of Hart Foundation stable after that, but it's really Jimmy Hart sort of like backing those two guys that was a prime example of something that could be done. I think it's an interesting idea to think that actually if you took a lot of these older wrestlers now, brought them in and used them in this way, that you'd really add to the history and the prestige of everything that's been achieved in the company, whether it was TNA or whether it was WWE. So that's my little thought for the day. Managers, we miss them. I personally really miss them and would really like to see them back again. So this is Stone Cold Stevie C, this from the Stevie Weavy channel, in my unofficial Welsh top, saying I'm not Mason Ryan, I'm Stone Cold Stevie C.